Recording. Welcome everyone to the Safety Summit. Quick little intro on some of the kind of technology things that are going on. Everyone received the email with the notice with the link on how to get here today. So if you're listening to this right now, then obviously you received this email because you followed the link. Very important link in that email as well is the TampaBayTrafficSafety.com site. If you follow that link, it takes you to our lovely webpage, the Tampa Bay Traffic Safety Academy, Local Area Traffic Safety Academy, LATSA. This is the location of the upcoming webinars. It shows all the ones that have been done for this year. It's the location where there is the registration link as well if you have somebody that you'd like to forward this along to. The calendar of upcoming events, the presentations of all of the past webinars, and the recordings are here. I already uploaded Larry's presentation in there, and you will see it as well as one of the handouts for the GoToWebinar window. Down at the bottom, there's some additional resources. The NCHRP reports that Larry's going to be talking about today have been uploaded here, as well as the PDH request form. Those items are handouts in your GoToWebinar window as well. So this is the place that you go to after the webinar to get the recordings and to get all of your information. Dennis is going to talk to you guys about the upcoming schedule of events, and I'm going to hand that over to him. He'll show you some of the upcoming webinar topics that we have proposed for 2017. At the end of the webinar, as you have gotten for the last two webinars, there is a quick little survey. We've listed those in there as well. If you have any topics that you are particularly interested in, make sure to type it into the comments of the survey. We also listed them there so you can kind of vote, check all that apply on the ones that you're most interested in, because we have more topics proposed than are available in the time frame, so we're trying to get a feel for the audience of the things that are upcoming. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Dennis, presenter, and I will be right back. I'm going to hang up my phone and call in again since I'm not able to hear anybody right now.
Good morning. This is webinar for 2016, and it's actually the last one for this year since there'll be no webinar in December. Today's safety webinar topic is safety data and analysis in developing emphasis areas plans, and it's going to be presented by Larry Hagan with Hagan Consulting Services. He's also a consultant to District 7 Safety Program, as well as FDOT Districts 2, 5, and 6. He also holds experience doing transportation engineering work throughout the state of Florida. With that, I'd like to give you an overview of the Academy. And as I've mentioned earlier, this is the District 7 Local Agency Traffic Safety Academy. It was formed 4 years ago to provide information regarding safety-related issues. So these issues can be enhance your local safety programs. The Academy for this year started in January 2016, and it will end on today. And they go for a minimum of 1 hour, but no more than 2 hours. And these are some of the links that Anthony mentioned earlier. This is a listing of all the webinars we've had this year. And I wanted to mention once again that we still are under process of submitting AICP credits, and they should be finalized here. So if you're a planner, you'll have to go out to the appropriate website to find that to get the credit for it. Also, I wanted to mention that the rollout of the 2017 topics is scheduled for December 2016. And you may not be able to read this because the type may be small, but we have 14 listed, and they'll be in the survey that Anthony mentioned. And I think we have a good selection of various topics for the upcoming year, which actually will be the 5th year of the Academy. Also, if you're a professional engineer, you can download the PDH form, and here's the link for that. And then you will send that to Larry Hagan. You can fax it or you can email it to him. And are there any questions or you need assistance at any time, you can please contact me. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over. I'm going to turn it over to Larry Hagan to begin his presentation.
All right, thank you, Dennis.
And Larry, I'm back on the line, Larry. So when you need your poll questions, let me know, and I'll take care of those for you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, I presume you can see my screen now. Everybody can see that well? All right, yes. Outstanding. As mentioned, today we're going to talk about safety data and analysis in developing emphasis area plans. That is a much bigger title than I typically like to use in presentations, but it is what it is, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But first, my standard disclaimer. Again, this is just a short 1-hour webinar. There's way too much information here that I cannot make you an expert in 1 hour on this topic, but I'm going to give you the resources so that you can become an expert on this topic. So I'm going to make the resources available to you. The stuff that's in the download pod is stuff you want to download if you're really interested in what we're going to present here. And so that's why it's all there in the download pod. But this 1 hour webinar will not make you an expert, but I'm going to point you to where to find the resources so you can become an expert. This topic, safety data and analysis in developing emphasis area plans, actually comes from one of the NCHRP Report 500 reports. And so if, Anthony, if you could bring up poll question number 1 while we're looking at this. The NCHRP Report 500, it's a series of reports that are guidance for implementing the AASHTO Strategic Highway Plan. So, poll question number 1 you see there, have you ever heard of NCHRP 500 before? And so I'll wait a few seconds, let people vote. So yeah, just have you ever heard of the NCHRP 500 series before? Yes or no? All right, Anthony, if you want to go ahead and close that. All right. I don't have the poll results on my screen. Can you tell me how it turned out there, Anthony?
We have 33% of the audience saying they have heard of it and 67% of the audience saying they have never heard of it. Okay, well, that's kind of what I expected. I mean, it's amazing to me because there is so much great information in this series. But one of the things, Federal Highway put a lot of effort into putting these reports together. I mean, Federal Highway and NCHRP, a lot of effort putting this together, but no one has ever done any training on the NCHRP 500 series. And so, yeah, it's amazing to me that anyone has heard of it, really, because no one ever did any training on it. They've kind of just lingered there in the background, but there's a ton of useful stuff here, and we're going to hopefully look for, or we're going to cover some of the info there. And again, I'm going to put the information in your hands so you can dig deeper yourself and learn more about what's in NCHRP 500. It's really interesting to me when I look at the cover that you see, and this is the same cover on all of the NCHRP 500 reports. I think that's a Ford Pinto, and what an appropriate vehicle to have on a safety report, because if you remember back when the Ford Pinto was being made, they had horrible problems with explosions. If you rear-ended a Ford Pinto, many times the gas tank would drop and there'd be an explosion. And so absolutely just ironic, if you I don't know if that was intentional to have a Ford Pinto on the cover of the Report 500 series, again, which is all about safety. The NCHRP 500 series, it is a series of reports. There's 23 reports in the series, and they all cover a whole bunch of different things. And this list is going to scroll up the screen now, and it goes real fast, but there's one report on aggressive driving, unlicensed drivers, horizontal curves, bicycles, pedestrians, work zone crashes, lots and lots of different things. And again, it's a 23-volume set that makes up the NCHRP 500 series of reports. The one we're going to look at today is Safety Data and Analysis in Developing Emphasis Area Plans. That's volume 21. And actually, it's
this really should, I think, be volume 1 because it's a good introduction to what the rest of the series really covers. And so, yeah, this is what we're going to be looking at today, and this volume is one of the items that's in the download pod, and so you can download the entirety of this NCHRP report from the download pod if you are live on the webinar today. But let me back up just a little bit and give you a little bit of history, how this all came into being. Back in 1996, 20 years ago, there was a meeting, and AASHTO, the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, they got together this big meeting that AASHTO and Federal Highway Administration and NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and TRB. So they got people together from all 4 of these organizations. They came together and they decided, hey, we want to do something. These are all safety experts and safety stakeholders. We want to come up with a really comprehensive plan. We want to do something strategically. We want to come up with a comprehensive safety plan. And that really was the foundation, the formulation of AASHTO's Strategic Highway Safety Plan. And that was the first SHSP, if you will, and that's AASHTO's Strategic Highway Safety Plan. And that led to some of the things that occurred in federal law, where they then required all the states, each and every state, to have their own Strategic Highway Safety Plan. And AASHTO kind of set the guidelines out there for creating a Strategic Highway Safety Plan, and that's really what a lot of the NCHRP 500 series is all about. It's creating and all the details you need for working a Strategic Highway Safety Plan. And so, again, that's what NCHRP 500 is really all about. And so you can see, again, the big meeting, all these people from all these different agencies thinking ahead, coming up with a big plan for addressing highway safety in a new way. It was a new approach to safety. They said, let's be strategic about this. Let's develop some strategies. Let's approach this strategically rather than the way it had been done in the past, which is so much piecemeal. That, okay, oh gosh, we got a problem over here. Let's do something over there. And a very piecemeal approach to highway safety. Another way to look at it is they said, hey, let's try to be proactive. Let's try to get ahead of the curve here. And so be proactive rather than being reactive. And so, again, that was the whole purpose of getting all these people together to formulate this Strategic Highway Safety Plan. The figure you see on your screen now appears in, I believe, 22 of the 23 volumes. It doesn't appear in the one we're talking about today, but really, this is AASHTO's implementation process for strategic highway safety planning, and it starts at the top. Step 1, you identify and define what kind of safety problem you're having. Identify what kind of things look out of whack, what kind of things we need to address. And then step 2, you figure out who are the people I need to invite to the table to come up with some things to do to fix this. So who are the appropriate participants for my safety program for this thing I want to do something about. In step 3, you establish your goals, your crash reduction goals. What do I think would be what I would call success in attacking this problem. Then you, in step 4, develop your program policies, your guidelines, your specifications, what it is you really think you want to do to make this work. In step 5, you look at alternatives. What alternatives are out there for addressing the problem? Step 6, you evaluate those alternatives. What do you think is going to be a good alternative? What do you think may be too costly or not really useful? In step 6, then you develop your recommendations, and you have to sell it to top management because somebody's got to come up with funding for it. So that's what step 7 is all about. Submit your recommendations so that top management can have buy-in and you get funding and that kind of stuff. Step 8, you develop your plan of action. Step 9, you establish your foundations for implementing your program. Step 10, you carry out your action plan. And then after you've implemented it, after you've carried it out, you assess. How successful were we? Were we successful doing the things we want to do? Did we achieve our goals? What things do we still need to do? So you assess your program and then transition and you start it over. Because, again, you hear a lot of people in the safety world talking about Vision Zero. Well, the only way you get anywhere close to Vision Zero, where you have 0 fatalities, is you got to keep working the plan, keep refining the plan, keep the plan moving forward. And so it's an ongoing process. It's this cyclical process. And again, this is what's spelled out in AASHTO's Strategic Highway Safety Plan, how we implement it, how we do it, how we make it work. And so again, this figure you'll see throughout all the rest of the volumes of the NCHRP 500 series of reports. All right, so again, we're talking about the Strategic Highway Safety Plan and what they really wanted to accomplish. They wanted to focus not only on engineering strategies, not only on the engineering side, but they also wanted to work in education, enforcement, and emergency response. They wanted to work in the other E's. And again, this was a meeting that happened 20 years ago. So this is when these kind of things started really coming to the forefront, if you will, in the safety community, that, hey, we need more than just an engineering approach. We need to get education involved. We need enforcement to be one of the players at the table. We need emergency response to be a part of our strategic plan as well. And so, again, this is the background of how we get to where we are talking about approaching safety strategically. Now, within the Strategic Highway Safety Plan that AASHTO developed, AASHTO's Strategic Highway Safety Plan, they identified 22 emphasis areas, and the 22 emphasis areas are in these 6 fairly broad categories: drivers, vehicles, special users, the highways themselves, emergency medical services, and also the management side of things. So the 22 emphasis areas can be grouped, if you will, into these fairly broad 6 categories. But again, the NCHRP 500 series of reports, there's 23, which cover those 22 emphasis areas, plus this that we're talking about today, which is, again, looking at the data and developing strategic plans from the data. And again, the list is going to scroll up real fast, but these are the 22 emphasis areas, and dealing with utility pole crashes, older drivers, seatbelt use, alcohol-related crashes, work zone collisions, motorcycle crashes, speeding-related crashes, and again, a different separate report for each of those emphasis areas. And like I said, today we're looking at volume 21, which again is looking at the data needed for us to develop our emphasis area plans. You know, what areas are we going to emphasize in our strategic safety plans? All through this report, through volume 21 of Report 500, one of the things it also references, which is also in your download pod, is this other NCHRP report, Report 501, which is on integrated safety management processes. And so again, it's in the download pod. You should download a copy of that, because a lot of the stuff in this particular volume of 500 talks to that report. All right, and again, if you've been doing anything in safety, and especially if you've been attending the LATSA webinars, our Local Area Traffic Safety Academy webinars, you've probably heard about Florida's Strategic Highway Safety Plan. Because like I said, after AASHTO developed theirs, federal legislation required to each state to develop their own Strategic Highway Safety Plan. Florida's has been around for several years. It was just updated this past October, just a month ago. So October 2016, Florida's Strategic Highway Safety Plan was updated. You can download it from Florida DOT's website. I didn't put it in the download pod, but you can go to Florida DOT's website and download Florida's updated Strategic Highway Safety Plan. But one of the things that this whole session here is about is, if you're a local government, you can really develop your own Strategic Highway Safety Plan. And the NCHRP guidance here helps you to develop your own strategic approach to highway safety, again, rather than a reactive or non-strategic approach to highway safety. So if you would, Anthony, can you pull up poll question number 2? And this question is all about, can you or have you developed your own strategic highway safety plan? This question is really aimed towards the local agencies. If you are a consultant working for a local agency, well, and feel free to answer the question as well. Does your agency have its own strategic highway safety plan? And so I'll wait a few more seconds, let you respond to that, reply to that. Looks like you're getting some responses there, Anthony.
Yep. So we have 65% have responded. Right now, 67%. Right now, it's 50-50. We have half of the audience saying yes and half of the audience saying no.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and close this and share the results. We ended up with 51% yes, 49% no. Okay,
so it's close to 50-50 split. It's, I guess, kind of like the recent election, huh? Real close to 50-50 split. All right, so, I mean, it is something many agencies, local agencies, especially, resources are tight, and taking the time to develop the plan, I understand, does take a lot of time. But it is beneficial to have a, again, strategic plan where you're trying to get ahead of the curve and be proactive rather than reactive. And I don't control the funding. I can't guarantee this, but I think it would help you in securing funding if you have a strategic plan for your locality, for your local government, and you can show that the things you're asking for funding assistance for are in pursuit of your strategic goals. And so if you don't have a plan, I think it would be something to think about, that it might be helpful in securing additional funding, again, because if you can demonstrate that I've got a strategic plan and this thing that I want to do is in pursuit of my strategic highway safety plan, I think that would sway a lot of people that, hey, this may be something where we might want to put some money in. Again, I can't make a guarantee. I don't control the funding, but I think it would surely strengthen your case if you can demonstrate I've got a strategic plan. I'm not doing this piecemeal, and this fits in with my strategic highway safety plan. So just take that for what it's worth. All right, the NCHRP 500 Volume 21, the one we're talking about today, it's divided into a lot of sections. The first 3 sections we're going to look at in some detail here. Section 1 defines a 3-stage process, and a 3-stage process begins with identifying emphasis areas. What are the areas that you want to emphasize in your strategic highway safety plan? And typically you want to pull one of the emphasis areas that were defined in AASHTO's strategic plan. So they've defined the 23 areas, and so you want to pull one of those, and so you want to identify the emphasis areas that you think are a problem in your locality, and then you want to set a goal for reducing fatalities, injuries, crashes, or whatever. Set a goal for reducing whatever the appropriate measure is there. And then you want to find the treatments that you expect will help you realize that goal. So that's the 3-stage process, basically. Section 2 of this report, and like I said, this is going to be a real high-level overview of what's in this NCHRP Volume 21. But there's a whole ton of stuff in here. If we got into details, this webinar would last for probably 2 or 3 days, so we can't do that for sure. But it's just going to be an overview. When you get to Section 2 of the report, it talks about the type of data that are required for you to make good safety decisions. And Section 3 backs up and gives some more details of the 3-stage process and how you implement the 3-stage process. So that's the first 3 sections. And then the remaining sections provide details and application of the three-stage process for the groups of emphasis areas. And you'll see this as I go through it. It might be somewhat repetitive as I go through it, but please bear with me. I think at the end of it, hopefully, you'll have something useful that you can really use in pursuing your own strategic highway safety plan. So Section 4 is all about roadway segments. Section 5 talks about intersections. Section 6 of the report talks about special road users. Then we have Section 7, which is illegal driver actions. And Section 8 is unsafe driver actions, which they are differentiating what are illegal actions that drivers make versus unsafe things drivers do that may be, not illegal but still unsafe. Section 9 looks at special vehicles. Section 10 talks about work zones. Section 11, EMS services. And Section 12 talks about improving the data. And so all these sections provide details in the application of that three-stage process that starts in Section 1 and how you apply that in each of these emphasis areas. All right, so again, let's dig a little bit deeper into this. So like I said, the first thing in Section 1 talks about defining or choosing your emphasis areas. And typically you're going to have more than one, and you're going to choose from typically those AASHTO 22 or 23 emphasis areas that are outlined. And so find the ones that are the crash problems in your locality. And typically it's going to be based on your crash patterns, your crash history, what you know about. Talk to your law enforcement. They can tell you what some of the things the emphasis areas should be. And so you come up with what are the emphasis areas. That's step number 1 in the three-stage process. And then you want to set your goal, fatality, injury, or crash reduction goal. What am I really shooting for? What do I want to accomplish that I'm going to call a success? And one of the things you want to do is make it realistic, but you also don't want to make it easy. You want to make it a little bit of a stretch at least, where I'm going beyond my typical daily work, and now I'm going to something that's going to take a little extra effort, take a little push to get there in terms of a crash reduction goal. And then step 3, you define the treatments and the subpopulation for each treatment that are required to reach your goal. Who am I going to reach and how am I going to reach them? Who are the people that I'm going to impact with the things I'm going to do, and what are the things I'm going to do that are going to help me reach this goal? All right. Section 2 of the report, like I mentioned, talks about the data types. And you got to have crash data. That's really the basis, the minimum that you really need if you're going to do anything in terms of reducing crashes. You at least need to know where you're starting from. So you need some basic minimum of crash data. It may just be crash summary tables. That may be all you have. If that's all you got, go with that. But hopefully you can get a little bit more with that. Anyone that's done any safety analysis, crash analysis knows that a hard copy of the crash reports is better. If you have the individual crash reports and you can look at it, especially if you can look at the narrative that the investigating officer wrote, you can really learn a lot more of the crash, learn a lot more about the crash experience and what's going on there by reading those officer narratives than you can by reading just summary tables. So getting hard copies of the crash reports is always going to be better for you. But the crash data has to be location coded. Again, especially if all you have is summary tables, you need to know where the crashes occurred, what direction the vehicles were going, and that kind of stuff. So it has to have some location element of the data. Some of the other stuff that's often useful, if you have roadway inventory data, and so if you know how many lanes are out there, how wide they are, is there a median, yes or no, what other roadway features may be out there, is it curb and gutter, or is it a rural type cross-section? And so having some roadway inventory data is often very useful and helpful as well. Maybe you don't have that in a database or something like that, but again, if you can pull that information together, again, it's going to help you in analyzing the crashes and figuring out, what may be the problems, what kind of countermeasures do I want to implement, and that kind of stuff. Traffic volume data is always very helpful. So again, if you can have traffic volume data, AADTs or hourly counts or whatever, if you have traffic volume data, again, that's often very helpful. And driver citation data, is there an enforcement problem there, or are there speeding problems there, that kind of stuff. If you have citation data, again, it can be very, very helpful to you in assessing what is the real safety issue here. So these are some of the data types that you want to think about. And important thing here, NHTSA reports that a lot of sources suggest about half the motor vehicle crashes in the country are not reported to police, and that's certainly that used to be the case in Florida because we didn't typically track crashes that didn't have injuries or fatalities. We're tracking a lot more of them now, but still there's many crashes that occur. Maybe it's just a minor fender bender or something like that, and it never gets reported to the police, never gets implemented or entered into any system because, I don't want my insurance company finding about it, raising my rates, and so, people just keep it quiet and, okay, I'll give you a couple $100, fix your car, whatever. And so there's a lot of the more minor crashes never reported to police, and so we are missing some of the data, and that is one of the things as a safety analyst you've got to have at least in the back of your mind, that even if you have a good database, even if you have great data, you probably still don't have all the data. You're probably still missing some of the stuff, and that's just one of the things we have to recognize. Another thing just to keep in the back of your mind, the crash data depends heavily on the judgment of the officer who writes the report. And often they show up after the fact, and they may make mistakes. They don't know everything that happened. They were not witnesses, and so they have to rely on the physical evidence they see and statements from the drivers or witnesses, which sometimes conflict, sometimes contradict, and they've got to choose and decide which one is more reliable and which one is less reliable. And so again, even if you have a good report, officer well-trained, he can only do the best he can with what he's got. And again, if you get conflicting witness reports, which does happen, he's got to choose what he thinks is the best. And many times, if you've ever read crash reports, you do see things where the officer says, that for some unknown reason, vehicle 1 left the pavement. And so they don't know the reason, and so you really don't know what's going on. So again, we don't have all the data, but we have, even if you have a great data set, you've got the data that's available to the officer at the time. So you got to go with what you got, though. Some of the data sources that are out there, FARS, the Fatal Analysis Reporting System, is maintained by NHTSA. It's a fairly robust, fairly good database, but it is only the fatal crashes, and each state reports all the fatal crashes to NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and NHTSA does a lot of analysis, and they do all they can to scrub the data and clean the data and make sure it's consistent and clean. And so that's one of the data sources that's out there. In District 7, District 7 has their crash data management system, and it's a very robust system, and a lot of great information, and much more than just fatal crashes. All the crashes are in the CDMS, great system, and very useful to the local agencies there in District 7. And you may have your own local crash data system. Many agencies do maintain their own. Some of the agencies in the District 7 area have their own version of CDMS. And a lot of times your local law enforcement also has crash data record system that's completely separate and independent of what the engineering side may have, but they maintain their own crash data. And if you have a good working relationship with your law enforcement group, then maybe you can share data. Maybe you can see, well, what things show up on your database's really hot issues. And that's a great conversation to have because they're the ones in the street writing those reports, and they often will give you a good perspective. All right, Anthony, can you bring up poll question number 3? And this is related to the data sources you use for the local agencies. So take just a moment and look at poll question number 3. All right, are people responding to that?
Yep, we've got about 45% responders at the moment. We have a mix of all answers, including we don't need no stinking database. They must use a map with thumbtacks.
Yes. All right, give a few more seconds and then close that out. And I'm unable to see the results, so if you would run through them there, Anthony, once you close that out.
All right, we're going to close it now and share the results. We have 26% of the audience uses the CDMS, the Crash Data Management System. 26% of the audience have their own independent system. 23% of the audience uses Signal 4 Analytics. 3% of the audience uses no stinking database, and 23% is other. So we have a pretty even split there between, the CDMS, their own system, Signal 4, and something else.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. So yeah, a pretty even split among a lot of different things here. So that's good. That's good. That's interesting. That is really interesting. So, well, and again, what you want to have is data that you're comfortable with. And so as long as you're comfortable with the data you're getting, by all means, we're supposed to be doing a data-driven process, and that's what this webinar is all about, having the data to drive a strategic approach to highway safety. So if you're comfortable with the data you're getting, by all means, keep at it. Oh, that is interesting. Okay. All right, well, then Section 3 of the report gets a little deeper into the details of how do we implement this 3-stage process that was outlined earlier in Section 1. And again, we start with defining or choosing what issues are our hot button issues, the areas we want to emphasize, picking our emphasis areas. And so start with the 22 critical safety issues that were identified in AASHTO's Strategic Highway Safety Plan. And again, you choose the emphasis areas, and again, typically more than one, based on what you've identified as being problems, based on your crash history and other safety-related data for your jurisdiction. Then Stage 2, you set your goal, and your Stage 1 analysis should help you identify how big a problem you've got in that emphasis area, how overrepresented the crash outcomes may be, and then that will help you develop a goal of what do I hope to achieve to bring it more in line with other locations. If I've got a road that has twice as many crashes as a similar road with a similar volume, well, I would like to get my goal might be to get it in line with other similar roadways. And so, again, that's a good goal to pursue. Or maybe you want to stretch it and see if I can get it down lower than other similar roadways, 10% lower than similar roadways. So interesting, your choice of goal, but again, you want to have it based on the data that you are analyzing and looking at. Then we get to Stage 3, and that's where we define the strategies and targets. So you want to identify the strategies that are going to help you reach the goal. The NCHRP 500 series is all about doing just that. And so throughout each of those 22 volumes in the 23 volume series, for each of those emphasis areas, it says, here are some strategies, here are some things to do, and here's how successful you may be if you implement this strategy. You can always also use the Highway Safety Manual and the CMF Clearinghouse for helping you develop what strategies I want to implement. What is a good strategy for addressing if I'm having head-on crashes? What is a strategy that's going to help me reduce head-on crashes? And what percentage reduction in head-on crashes can I expect if I implement this strategy? And so, again, all the other NCHRP 500 reports help you get there, and Highway Safety Manual and the online CMF Clearinghouse also are very helpful to that end. The populations, we talked about who are the populations we want to reach. Humans, vehicles, and roadway sites. So the treatment I'm going to implement, is it going to impact just drivers, or is it going to impact also pedestrians or bicyclists? Who are the groups I'm really trying to reach here? Am I trying to reach the teen drivers, the young, inexperienced drivers, or am I having a problem with elder drivers? That is something that is overrepresented in a lot of the fatal crashes in the District 7 area. Having personally reviewed a lot of the fatal crashes, I didn't do a lot of statistical analysis on it. Just having reviewed hard copies of many of the crashes, I see over and over again, elderly people involved in a crash, and due to their frail condition or whatever, a crash that maybe a younger person might survive, the elderly person passes away as a result of that crash, and it becomes a fatal crash. And so there are things we can do, countermeasures, in one of the NCHRP reports that will help you address collisions involving older drivers. And so, again, you want to identify what are the populations that I want to deal with in my strategic approach to making my highways safer. All right, so the Stage 3 also identifies these 4 procedures. And Procedure 1, you want to choose the treatments when you have your treatment effectiveness is known. That means you have good crash modification factors, so you know how effective each treatment is going to be, and where you have crash and non-crash data available. So that's Procedure 1. You've got good data, you know what treatments you want to implement, and you know how effective they should be, and that helps you define what treatments to implement. Procedure 2, you're choosing your roadway-based treatments and your populations. Your treatment effectiveness is known, crash data are available, but maybe you're missing some of the roadway inventory data. And so there's a separate procedure. It's a little bit different when you're missing some of the data. Procedure 3, you're addressing now driver, vehicle, or roadway treatments and populations when the treatment effectiveness is not known. You really don't know how effective it's going to be, and so the procedures are a little bit different. You don't have real good effectiveness data, but you still want to choose something that's going to hopefully be effective. And then Procedure 4, choosing the treatments, target populations, and emphasis areas, which some of the treatments have known effectiveness, some do not. And so it's in Section 3, it really lays out these different 4 procedures, what you do when you have each of these conditions, where you have some good effectiveness data, maybe you don't have all the effectiveness data, maybe you have missing data of some other sort, or maybe you have all the data. And so different procedures based on the quality and quantity of your data and the quality and quantity of countermeasures that you want to implement, how well known the effectiveness of that is. All right, so this may seem repetitive as we go through this, but I'm going to go through this next part quickly because it's a rough touch at the remaining sections. Section 4 of the report talks about roadway segment program. So you're looking at a segment, and you want to implement the procedures that we just described in Section 3. Those 4 procedures for roadway segments, and so it's all about planning a program related to reducing these type of crashes, the type of crashes that occur roadway segment-based crashes. So runoff road type crashes, head-on crashes, crashes on curves, striking utility poles, people striking trees. These are segment-related problems, much more than intersection-related problems. And so if that's the kind of stuff you have, this section, Section 4, really walks you through it. And then it references now specific NCHRP reports that will address those specific types of crashes. So if you have a big problem with crashes with trees, Volume 3 is what you want to go to. Volume 3 is going to give you a lot of good countermeasures to implement and work in conjunction with NCHRP 500 Volume 21, the one we're talking with now, implementing the procedures and using the countermeasures that are spelled out in Volume 3, you can come up with a good strategy, a good plan for how I'm going to address my problem with tree crashes. And same for all these other things. And so again, you pull out your NCHRP 500 report. It gives you a lot of great information on the strategies I want to implement, how effective I think they're going to be, and we'll see that as we get a little closer to the end of this presentation. So, Section 5 then talks about junctions, which means intersections, and so again, we're just implementing one of the 4 procedures described in Section 3 for junctions. And so if we want to reduce crashes at signalized intersections or unsignalized intersections, here are the resources. And so Volume 5 for unsignalized, Volume 12 for signalized, and again, loads and loads of information there. We'll walk you through it. So for instance, here's some stuff from Volume 5, the unsignalized intersection guide. This is just a small sample of some of the objectives and strategies that are spelled out in Volume 5. And so if your objective is to improve the management of access near unsignalized intersections, and then the things you can do there, implement driveway closures, relocations, implement driveway turns restrictions. These are some things you could do. And then objectives, you see 17.1b, reduce the frequency and severity of intersection conflicts through geometric design improvements. And then listed below there are a lot of different strategies focused on achieving that objective. And this is straight out of that Volume 5 report for unsignalized intersections. Let me back up there. So next to each of those strategies, you see a T or a P or something like that. That's related to, there's 3 classifications of these strategies: things that are proven, things that are tried, and things that are experimental. Things that are proven, that means something that has a good crash modification factor. There's lots of data backing up, how effective that strategy is going to be. Something that's tried, well, there's not as much statistical background for how effective it may be, so it often will just give you a trend. We think this is going to reduce crashes, or we think this may increase crashes if you do this thing, or whatever. So the tried, there's not the statistical basis for crash reduction factor or crash modification factor. And the experimental stuff, there's really no data for. So if you see some of the strategies that show up, with the E out there, it's experimental. Well, somebody is experimenting with it, but again, there's no data yet on it. So that's just the stuff. And another thing that you get for each of the reports, for each of those strategies, it's giving you a table that tells you what's the relative cost to implement and operate. Is it low, moderate, high, or high? And what's the time frame for implementation? So again, lots and lots of great information. For each of these strategies, is it going to cost a lot of money? Can it be implemented quickly? You can find this stuff in the NCHRP 500 report. All right. Section 6 looks at special road user populations. And again, implementing those same procedures now for those special road user populations. So dealing with crashes involving older drivers, younger drivers, pedestrians, bicyclists, and again, a separate NCHRP 500 report for each of those, audience segments, if you will. And so Volume 9 is older drivers, Volume 10 pedestrians, Volume 18 bicycles, Volume 19 is younger drivers. And so if you have a big problem with older drivers, go to Volume 9. It's going to give you some good suggestions, things to implement for dealing with your problem of older driver crashes. Same thing for the others. And so, there's the Volume 9, a great report giving the information, what do I do to reduce collisions involving older drivers? Section 7 is illegal driver actions. I mentioned this. So you're looking at reducing crashes involving aggressive drivers, alcohol-impaired drivers, unlicensed or suspended drivers. And so, again, you pull up the NCHRP reports, and it'll help you there. But, a big problem with some of these things where you're doing driver-oriented strategies, there's not as much data where you can really estimate crash modification factors or crash reduction factors or benefit cost ratios for those kind of things. So it is a big issue there. There's some guidance in the NCHRP reports that are applicable here, but you won't get good, hard, solid crash modification factors, crash reduction factors, and that kind of stuff for these kind of things. So volume 1 of the series is aggressive driving collisions, unlicensed drivers or drivers with suspended or revoked license, volume 2, and alcohol-related collisions is volume 16 of the series. And so those are the references for learning more about addressing those kind of crashes. And again, driver-related stuff, it's tough to get good crash modification factors. Unsafe driver actions, again, different from illegal driver actions. And so here you're looking at things involving distracted drivers, fatigued drivers, and unbelted occupants of the vehicles. And so, once again, that same big problem, driver-oriented strategies, it's tough to get crash modification factors, crash reduction factors, and good solid benefit cost ratios. But there's the guidance that's out there for that. And so again, references for how do I build my program, what are the strategies I want to implement to help me address those issues, if those are the crash related issues that you're dealing with. If you have special vehicle issues, typically what they're talking about here is large trucks or motorcycles. Those are the ones that were identified in AASHTO's strategic plan. And so if you're looking to reduce crashes involving trucks or motorcycles, here are the appropriate references. And again, it's going to give you, here are the strategies, and here's the expectation of how effective they're going to be. And there's also a lot of other information in the reports, this crash cost by crash severity and posted speed, straight out of, this is the one on trucks, is where this table comes from. So, like I said, a ton of information in all these reports, and this is just a high-level overview. All right, I'm sorry, yeah, Section 10 is reducing crashes in work zones. Work zones are always a real area of concern because every driver is now an unfamiliar driver because you changed the roadway. And so even the people that drive that road every day, well, now you've changed the roadway. And so every driver is now an unfamiliar driver when you implement a work zone. And so volume 17 gives you, some guidance there, some strategies for reducing work zone crashes. We're getting to the end, so stick with me. Section 11, reducing death and injury consequences through improved rural EMS services. And in the medical industry, it's called the golden hour, the 1 hour after a crash, really determines whether a person's going to live or die typically. And so when there's a severe crash, you need to get the right people, the right stuff on the ground to them as quick as possible. And in rural areas, that's often very tough because you've got lots of space, and oftentimes it may be a long time before the crash is detected and reported. And so we can really reduce the severity of crashes, we can reduce deaths as long as we can get the EMS services, the right people to the crashes quicker. So being able to detect crashes is really important, and being able to get the right people, like I said, to the crash scene quickly will help reduce the deaths that occur on the rural highways. So again, volume 15 really gives you information, the strategies you want to implement to enhance rural EMS services. So another great useful resource there. And finally, Section 12 of our report talks about data improvements and what they can do for you. And it references also another report that is in your download pod, Crash Record Systems and Having Good Data, because it's really only with good data that you can make good safety decisions, that you can really have a strategic approach to highway safety. So you want to have good data, and so again, that really forms the basis of how we strategically focus on traffic safety. All right, well, that was a quick high-level overview of Volume 21. And it's all about having good data. With good data, you can make good decisions. With good data, you can strategically make your roadways safer. You can strategically figure out what things do I want to do and what can I expect by doing these things, by implementing these different actions. And with that, I'm going to see if we got any questions. Any questions, anyone?
There's actually kind of an unrelated question, or well, related because of one of the answers in the polls. I'm going to go ahead and bring up an additional poll question to help out the person that's asking that. They want to know the mix of local agencies versus FDOT, because they're wondering, in the 50-50 split on the folks that have made a strategic highway safety plan
That's a good question.
versus not. They kind of want to know some more info. So let me bring up a poll question that will just ask if you represent a local agency or FDOT. Yeah, it looks like right now we have a 60-40 split, 60% local agency, 40% DOT. So 61% local agency, 39% FDOT. So 60-40 is, I guess, a rule of thumb split here for the Safety Academy.
Okay.
Hopefully that helps out. Person.
Okay, one of the questions, I guess, that you may have that I guess nobody's asked yet. Okay, wow, you've talked about all these NCHRP reports. Where do I get them? Well, you can easily, if you just Google NCHRP 500, that should take you to a page. Or another way you can get there, you can go to my website, go to trafficsafetyguru.com. And if you go to my links page, there's a link there to the NCHRP 500 page. And you can download all the reports for free from, it comes off of TRB's webpage actually, but you can download the reports for free, or if you feel like contributing to TRB, you can buy hard copies from them. And so, again, trafficsafetyguru.com, go to my links page, and one of the links there is to the NCHRP 500 page.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of information in those reports.
There's a ton of information there, and I mean, it's really good information on what kind of countermeasures may address different things that I'm experiencing, that are strategically focused on addressing the different types of crashes or different things you're experiencing. And the reports give you a lot of information on what's a short-term fix, what might be a long-term fix, what might be low cost, what might be medium cost or high cost, and that kind of stuff. So it is a ton of information in those reports that, again, is very useful when you are trying to strategically address highway safety. And it is amazing. Federal Highway did no training on it. They put out the reports, and then there was no funding for training, so they kind of died. So that is one of the things I'm intending to do. And some of the sessions that are coming up are the ones that are at least anticipated for next year. A couple of them are from the NCHRP 500 series, and that's one of the things I'm working on. I want to have all the reports covered with some kind of training. So I think there is a lot of information that can be helpful to a lot of agencies, a lot of people. We can do things to save lives. It's just we got to know what tools are at our disposal and use the right tools.
I think maybe kind of jokingly, if they were to update their report cover to have a Mustang or a Camaro or something, it would just be a little bit more of an attractive report. Pinto.
Yeah.
It just makes it look like you should be wearing bell bottoms while reading the report, and it's not applicable to today's day and age.
Absolutely.
Larry, this is Dennis Balloon. I was wondering if it was your listing of these reports out on your website. You had mentioned to me in a conversation how at one time these were kind of topics required for the various states to have training in these particular areas. Is that not true?
Well, the states haven't had training in it.
Right, I know that. But they laid them out for the states to have the training, correct?
Yeah, well, they've been laid out. These are basically these emphasis areas that are laid out in AASHTO's strategic plan are what they're expecting the states to have in their strategic plan, that you're going to pull from these emphasis areas, and those, will be the emphasis areas that you would use in your own strategic highway safety plan, that you're going to use a subset of those 22 emphasis areas. And so Florida has identified, I think, is it 8 or 9? I don't remember now off the top of my head. I think it's 9 emphasis areas that Florida is targeting in Florida's strategic highway safety plan, and it's tied to those 22. And again, that just helps you identify and decide what are the areas I want to emphasize, and then again you go to that report and it helps you identify, okay, I've identified this area as an area of concern. What are the strategies I want to implement, and what do I hope to achieve by implementing that strategy?
Okay. Thank you.
We have all these sources, Larry, for countermeasures. In your experience, could you give a little bit of guidance as far as if we should go? Because that we've got the NCHRP reports, we have the clearinghouse, and we also have the highway safety manual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
what are do you know the strengths and weaknesses of them, and kind of when we should go to one versus the other?
Yeah, the thing I like in the NCHRP 500s is there's a whole lot of information that ties the different strategies, the different things you may want to do to, is it short-term, long-term, is it very costly or not so costly, and a lot of other information that ties these things together. And so that's a good starting place. The CMF Clearinghouse really is the most up-to-date. The NCHRP reports are a few years old, and more safety research is being done. And so I would start with the NCHRP 500s, but then look at the CMF Clearinghouse to validate and see if the crash modification factors have changed, or if there's more information or better crash modification factor information, now in the CMF Clearinghouse than there was 10 or 15 years ago when that report 500 was produced. And same with the highway safety manual. A lot of the stuff, or all of the stuff actually in the highway safety manual, is in the CMF Clearinghouse. So again, really, the CMF Clearinghouse is going to have the most up-to-date stuff because it's online, it's not hard copy. And so I think that's probably one of the best sources. But again, the NCHRP reports have more information than what the CMF Clearinghouse has. So I'd use both of those in conjunction.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, the clearinghouse it's kind of the living document because it's online.
Right,
so
exactly.
That's the most up-to-date, and they're adding countermeasures all the time, and things are changing. And yeah, I really like, though, how the NCHRP reports, as you show, kind of tie it to short-term, long-term, mid-term, high cost, and it just has, and it kind of groups them by emphasis area. It's a nice way of presenting the information.
Yeah, it's a great resource, and it helps you, again, focus strategically on it. And then as you start really looking at your expected effectiveness and that kind of stuff, then you go to the CMF Clearinghouse to refine your choices, if you will, and refine the things you're going to do.
Give folks a minute or two here, see if there's any questions in the chat. There's a clarification. We were not sure about the number of emphasis areas. It says, just to clarify, there are 10 emphasis areas in the 2015 Strategic Highway Safety Plan, in 2016 has added new areas, including work zones.
Okay, good. Okay. Thank you. I didn't have that in front of me, and I couldn't recall it off the top of my head.
That's good, yeah.
Well, if there's no other questions in the chat, I mean, I can end the recording here and hang out online for a few minutes to see if anything else comes up. Dennis, it sounds like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to say something to the attendees. I just want to remind everybody again, this is the last webinar for 2016. Look forward in your email to the 2017 topics. It should be out to you next month. And we've enjoyed having you this year. If you're here for the first time, enjoy having you also. And looking forward to seeing you folks again next year in January. If you ever have any questions or any problems, please let us know. Thank you.
Also, the logistics of how we have the registrations set up and go to webinar. If you are registered right now, you will continue to receive the notices. So there is no additional registration required. So if you wish to no longer receive the notices, I believe right from GoToWebinar, you can, from that notice, you can unsubscribe. If that doesn't work, just send us an email and we can take you off of the list. But we hope that as we continue to grow and get more and more people on these webinars, our audience continues to grow. So yeah, thanks everyone for attending. I guess with that, I'll end the recording, and we will stay on the line for a few minutes if there is anything else that comes up.